Hi everyone, my name's Kuri, and today I'll be presenting Memes and Community, a rhetorical criticism with a focus on VALORANT, the video game. So VALORANT released in 2020, and it's an online first-person shooter that's super popular with millions of users, and one of its key features is a thing called a Battle Pass, which is it consists of exclusive seasonal rewards with a free or a paid track that you unlock by playing the game. And oftentimes items within this Battle Pass contain Easter eggs with lore, community jokes, or themed items towards game content. One of the items in particular that exist in Battle Pass are things called sprays. They're usually like these sticker images that you see here on the right that are often reference memes or jokes within the community and are plastered on different surfaces within the terrain of the game. And oftentimes they're used for self-expression by players and are typically used after a successful play because that's when you kind of get a chance to breathe, and you're able to use them before the game starts, in the middle of the game, or after it ends. Interviews from the development team, Sean Marino, who's an art lead, he answered a lot of great questions about their creative process in choosing what sprays to do, why do they do memes sometimes, and the reason behind it is because the development team wanted to focus on non-verbal means of expression. VALORANT, since it's a tactical game, you're able to use text chat and voice chat, and so they wanted to find other ways that players could express themselves using other things besides words, and art is a great way to do that. So some of the focuses that they had while trying to think of what topics to do sprays for the community, they wanted to look at the meta, which is the ideal lineup of characters or strategies to have the most success, and that changes every season. New content such as new agents, new weapons, new maps, stuff like that. And what are the plans? What are the players talking about? What's the community talking about right now? Are there any jokes going around? Are there any like themes or challenges that anyone's doing that they could kind of illustrate in an image that the community can then use? The sprays that we'll be talking about today is part of a spray series, which there's not a lot of in Valorant, but this is the only spray series that references memes in Valorant. This is also fine, this is also fine, and this is really not fine. And as you can see from the first two, very specifically from the first two, you can tell it's referencing the "this is fine" meme with the dog and the fire. So we're going to go over that. The framework that I'm using is going to be kind of pulled from the modal analysis reading that we did for the meme week. I'm going to be looking at the form, the context, the intent of the developers for this particular image, and the overall reception of the player base after this was released. And within the context, we'll talk about the message and the environment that this was released in and such. So the original meme, "This is Fine," came out in 2013, and it was originally a 6-panel cartoon, and it was shared on Reddit and 4chan and gained popularity on there, and then it kind of resurfaced in 2016 during that election because it was used by a lot of politicians, and then it resurfaced again in COVID-19, so it's kind of been around on the internet for a while. But only the first 2 panels are what got popular. Those were what were originally posted. So a lot of people don't even know that it is a 6-panel cartoon. But what made "This is Fine" so successful? It's really recognizable pose. The flames are really recognizable, and very simple props just to really illustrate the setting. But the expression on the dog's face is what draws people in, what makes people really like it. It's because it's an expression that everyone can relate to at some point, one or another, and it's really easy to share that and use that as a reaction for things. So the emotion that "This is Fine" is come to a consensus to depict is a sense of denial or acceptance in a hopeless circumstance. As I said before, it's long-lasting because of its pose. It has a relatable expression, little to no text. In the second panel of the first thing, it only says "This is Fine," which is where it got its name from. But even if you just saw this one image without any text from the first panel, you would still understand it. So the spray in Valorant is called "This is Also Fine," which I find is interesting because all the items in the game have titles in order to identify them, but I think it's interesting that they added "also" instead of using a different phrase, but I think it works really well at remixing the title as well as the meme itself without taking away the sentiment of it. Instead, it's adding onto it, saying "this is also fine," not "this is like the opposite," you know? So the form for this form from the modal analysis reading is talking about the impression or the feeling that you get from it. So the relatable expression, saying that you got that reference because you're like, oh, I understand like what this is referencing. It's referencing the "This is Fine" meme. And then the context of it, it's within the Valorant universe, so instead they're swapping characters like King Coffee, which is a mascot of a brand, and then Phoenix, who's the character sitting in the chair, instead of the dog in his mug. And this spray, and all of the ones that I'm going to be talking about are on the paid track of battle passes, so keep that in mind. These are not free items, these are items you do have to pay for. So the intent the developers had behind sprays like this spray was for players to express feelings in certain situations. So for this one, for example, they wanted them to be able to express the feeling of acceptance in a hopeless situation, since there will be situations like that in a tactical shooter. And it was incredibly popular. It still really is. There's tons of people who always ask how they can get it. And since it's a battle pass spray, if you didn't get it when it came out, you'll never get it. So it also has an element of exclusivity. So the second one, who came out a couple seasons later, the form is similar, but since it's more specific now, it kind of is like, oh, like, yeah, I've been there, instead of like, oh, I got that reference. So the form for this one is referencing a specific scenario in the game that this one originally was being used for. So the developers kind of used this spray to say, oh, we see how you've been using the other one, so let's make a spray for that, which is when you're trying to defuse the spike. So it's a really more ambitious twist. The character's not sitting anymore, they're standing, holding something, there's no table, there's no mug, instead it's a bomb. The fire's not the same, instead it's a Molotov, it's not just stuff being on fire. So the intent behind it's a little different. They wanted to create a spray that reflects the original emotion behind this is fine, of the acceptance in a hopeless situation, but they wanted a more specific scenario, relevant to the game community that it's being made for. And the reception, since it has a more specific depiction, it wasn't used as frequently, specifically because the developers changed how sprays were allowed. So sprays containing characters like this one and the other one were not allowed mid-round, which is when the old one was originally being used for. So this one's kind of obsolete at this point. And then the very last one, this is really not fine. It took me a while to understand the context of this one because I didn't know that this is fine had a remix in 2016 by the original artist because of how popular it was during the elections. So this meme, this is really not fine, is referencing a point where the dog snaps in the remixed comic, and he says this is not fine. So this is really not fine is following the same theme as the previous sprays with their titles. Instead of adding also, it's saying this is really not fine. So it's still adding the exaggeration to it. Except in this one, instead of stuff being on fire, this character's just run out of pizza. There's no more pizza left. So it's a different context, and also a different context than the previous ones. They're not trying to do anything crazy. This person just really wants pizza. So the intent behind it is instead like acceptance and more of the intense panic, like in the context, the intense panic behind it, or sadness. And it's still well received. Everyone still loves the memes, but this one I see used in different situations than the previous two. I see this one used in rounds of losses, or if things just don't go well because you're not accepting it, you're being upset by it. So in conclusion, mimetic references in video games, especially in Valorant, are very beneficial for the game's community. Esports is able to get in on it and kind of plug their own stuff into the game. The player base is able to kind of have a say in it based on how they use things and how they talk about the game. And engagement goes up. People are excited to see what the next battle pass is going to have. And off that branch of battle passes, it's a way for them to make money. Adding content that players want to buy, you're going to get people to buy it. And remixing memes gives a lot of room for creativity, especially when they're able to kind of take their whole spin on it, like with this one, for example, by continuing off of like some Easter eggs most people didn't even know about. So it's a really good way for video games to keep a strong community while staying relevant within internet culture.